agree with you specifically. What we see many companies, not only this one, the management comes out when they try to build morale. They talk about a lot of corporate language. What I say, okay. In my training, I always say you cannot only speak corporate language, because when you bring textbook wordings, you are not connecting with your audience. So compassion part, it sounds easy, but in fact, it's very tough and difficult for corporate senior management, because maybe they have seen numbers, they're dealing with problems every day, and then suddenly the compassion part, it's gone. If that's the case, gonna throw back to you, Ellen. Maybe in 2 lines, 3 lines, or very simple words, how would you suggest the management or HR leader to say something, or what approach they can pursue to motivate with a compassion, with their in a more passionate and compassionate way?
Well, when we look at the strength finders for leaders, when they talk about compassion, I think what they're looking for is empathy, right? Employees, when they leave a company, usually they're leaving because of their immediate supervisor. So if their supervisor shows these employees that I care about you, you can trust me, and they're able to show empathy, where the employee feels that there's a sense of belonging and a sense of stability, and there's a hope for a better future, people are willing to join a leader, right? They're going to have these leaders will have followers because they're demonstrating the attributes that people are looking for. Sometimes it's not even the company. Sometimes people join an organization because of the people they work for. We've all heard of the saying that people join a company but then leave because of their supervisors, right? So it is very key for Cathay Pacific or CX to hire, train, nurture, and retain good leaders. Leaders that can provide those 4 things that we talk about, that their teammates or their employees or their immediate team members can trust their word. So this goes back to earlier, making promises that you cannot keep, that eventually would maybe fall apart, is going to break trust. So how can you build trust? How can you show empathy? How can you give the employees a sense of a hope and stability? And if they can do these things, I believe there's a good chance that Cathay Pacific can turn things around.
Am I wrong by saying when CX tried to explain to the public that the flight cancellation was attributed to the pilots reporting sick, is that a very wrong first step to explain such flight cancellation?
Well, there's a difference between an excuse and a reason. And people would use a reason as an excuse, or an excuse as a reason, or they'll excuse their failure. But CX, being a logistic company, essentially, even though they are in the people business of carrying someone from point A to point B, right? They're in the logistics business. You can look at people as packages. How can we get packages from X to Y? Just like FedEx is a logistics company, UPS is a logistic company, and I'm sure FedEx and UPS also have people that would be sick, and they may have people that may not be able to work at a certain time. But how does a logistics company solve that? That goes into management, goes into systems. It's not something that I'm an expert in solving, but this goes into the symptoms, right? When you make an excuse for the symptoms, then you're not really looking at the core problem, and you need to solve the core problem. The core problem is there's a lack of good logistics management, or at least that's how I look at it. Like from someone from the outside, when you say our pilots are sick, then it's almost like saying we did not plan for that. And that's just poor planning.
Then now we see that profit isn't coming back soon, at least. Then how can Cathay Pacific navigate better between the pressure from the government, the licensing body, that means the Civil Aviation Department, union, customers, and the media?
That is a more complex problem. We can easily say that most companies experience that. Most company, experience a lack of funding or cash flow in order to grow the organization. We can look at it this way. We can look at the fact there's enough demand for CX to stay in business, but now there's a lot of demand and there's not enough supply, which is actually a good problem for a company to have. When you have a lot of demand but not enough supply, that means your organization can grow. So you're not at a startup phase, you are now at a growing phase. So when they change the mindset to look at we're in the growing phase of an organization, then you will start finding appropriate solutions. I don't know enough about Cathay Pacific, but as a company, one of the ways to look at the growing phase is how can we fund this? How can we fund the growth? How can we buy more assets? How can we buy more talent? And this goes into, it could be investments. It could be funding from the government for a temporary funding from the government. It could be an acquisition or a partial acquisition from another more profitable airline. It's about how can we inject cash in there, because once you have this cash, then you can meet the demand and then you have a way to pay off your loans or debts or whatever. And so making sure that you meet this demand is part of that growing process.
If that's the case, allow me to have one more question, Alan. There's people are not joining the company, or it takes time to train. It also has the maximum flying hours for each pilot or captain specifically. We have seen that means now, as you said, it's a good problem. Demand is high, supply is low. The company does not have investment or does not have enough money yet to put on to increasing the supply. If that's the case, from back to a negotiation perspective or conflict resolution, any interim or quick fix first, and then they can slowly bring up the talent pool.
Well, I don't know exactly the situation and the resources that are available to Cathay Pacific, but in a very similar situation in the US, when I was helping a lot of the manufacturing companies, what happened is when during the raising of the tariff between China and the US, a lot of work left China and came back to the US, meaning that there was a lot more demand locally, but then there wasn't enough people in the business of machining, forging, and metal casting. So what did they do? How did they solve it? Kind of what CX is kind of doing, having people work longer hours. Okay. In doing so, they had to pay time and a half. And sometimes they had to call people that had just retired to come back and help. So this goes into an effective strategy on how do you approach people that have left the industry to come back. And that would be the fastest fix to an immediate problem, right? So training people, going from first officer to captain, et cetera, it takes time. If you speed up that process, the long term is you have failure because you have a quality problem. The reason airline cares about quality is because people's lives are on the line. So when there's a process, the process was there initially because that ensured certain quality. Now, if you lower the quality in order to solve this problem, in the long term, the question they have to ask is this: how much risk are we willing to take with the lives of our passengers? Because you can put a kid in the pilot in the cockpit with someone who has flown on a computer game and go, I know how to fly a plane, right? Just put them on the plane. I'm taking it to an extreme. If you go to an extreme, now people are going to die. So the question is, how much risk are they willing to take by compromising the quality of the training and the expediting of people into certain positions? I think the fastest fix is to find people who have left the industry and entice them to come back. Because for every one that they can bring back, it's a lot of hours of training and making sure that they are not going to make those critical mistakes. And in the short term, that will fix it. And then in the long term, you will still have people who are trained to come back into it. So it goes into multiple prongs. You have to have the funding. You have the ability to bring people back and negotiate with them. You have to have empathy in the leadership to give the public trust, to help them trust the organization once more, and to have employees see the company in the future with a sense of stability and hope, and they can see leadership that they can trust and they can follow. So all these are different aspects of solving a complex problem.
Very good input. Thank you, Alan. What I heard, to summarize quickly, is that it's a complex world, specifically with a company in this size, in the logistics or aviation industry where public safety, passenger safety is high stake. Then it involves governments, authorities, public, media, everybody is putting an eye on the Cathay management. What we can see is that they can convey trust better in a compassionate, connecting way. And also the CEO should demonstrate much better executive presence to show that he is having everything under control. Then, of course, we are looking forward to see the improvements within CX and hope that less flight will be cancelled and we can all fly happily on CX again.